Hello everyone, my name's Chris Granary from EOS Property Group, and I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about our Armchair development at 164 Odin Road in Innaloo. The plan for this short webinar will be just to initially talk about the armchair developer concept, how it works and how it might suit you, and then to talk more specifically about the project Odin Road itself, and then finally what to do next in the process. If we just step back a moment, we might like to think about the ways to buy a property. There's probably 4 or 5 different ways to do it, and it certainly suits different investors at different times. The most obvious one, of course, is just to go out and buy a second-hand property. There's nothing wrong with that, provided you choose one in the right area, it's not too old, you're aware of the depreciation capacity of property, then there's nothing wrong with a second-hand property. Relatively easy to do. It's fairly difficult to find any bargains out there because the real estate industry is such that it's very easy to check prices and it's hard to get a bargain or hard to pay too much. The second way to do it, of course, is to go and buy a brand new property. But often you can get one that's a display home or something like that, house and land package, or a brand new apartment that's just come on the market. And that's a very good way to do it as well, provided the location's okay, and it does offer some significant advantages in terms of depreciation. Another way to do it, of course, is to purchase off-plan. And off-plan means where a developer is going to produce a set of apartments, for example, or perhaps some house and land packages, and you put your name against one of the properties up front, you pay a small deposit, and a couple of years down the track, when the property is complete, you pay the remainder of the purchase price and take ownership. Typically, off-plan suits a developer because it allows him to go to the banks and show that he's got a pre-sale for that property. And it may suit you as well because if the market's booming, then the price that you agree to at the very beginning, of course, is the price that you pay at the end. And you may have seen some capital growth over that building period. And the other way, of course, is perhaps to do your own development. Now, as we know, developers make around about 15, maybe 20% profit on their developments. Certainly there's some curly bits and some difficulties in doing your own development, but there is a significant profit that can be made. Of course, there is some risks as well. So if you ever were considering doing your own development, there is a potential for good profit. There's no doubt about that. And many people who have made significant money out of property have made it through property development as opposed to, say, property investment. However, some of the issues associated with the development are that you really do need expertise. It's not a game for new players. There is lots of things happening, many things you need to be aware of, and at any one time there's many moving parts. It's almost a full-time job to get a development from dirt through to completion. A very large amount of work required and knowledgeable expertise. And typically, you need a lot of money as well. If you're going to buy a development block, you may need to spend $1 million up front of your own money and then have to go and borrow the remainder in order to complete the construction. So there's significant outlay for any one investor. You very much do need to have deep pockets. And in many cases, in order to borrow the funds to complete the development, you need to have to pre-sell all the units in order for the banks to lend you the construction finance. And if your intention was to keep 3 or 4 of these, or keep one of them, for example, you may not be allowed to do that unless you can put more money into the construction finance component. So whilst certainly doing a development is a very good idea, there is some difficulties involved that you need to be well aware of. Being aware of this, we at EOS have developed this armchair developer concept, and this, we believe, offers many solutions to the problems we've outlined above. So let's talk a little bit about the armchair developer concept and how it works, the process involved, because we think it's pretty cool. First of all, we start with a group of investors. For example, with this Odin Road site, we've got 8 units that will be completed, and therefore we're looking for 8 investors. So the investors get together and form a joint venture, and the joint venture becomes the entity that actually goes ahead and does the development. Now, the first thing the joint venture does, because it's an armchair development, is to go and employ someone else to do all the work. And we employ a development manager. And I'll talk more about his role later on, but essentially he drives the entire project. He goes ahead and does all the work necessary to complete the project. In the end, each of the investors walks away with their own individual apartment, owned completely by themselves. So the joint venture that they formed originally to build and construct the project then dissolves, and each investor takes away his own property as a result. And EOS's job is to liaise and coordinate the whole operation, from the gathering of the investors at the very beginning to the assisting in finding tenants at the very end. So let's look at a bit more detail the process. There's three parts to it. There's the finding the land and making sure the feasibility works. There's the construction phase, the building proposals, and then there's the conclusion phase, how each of the joint venture partners separates away from the joint venture to take ownership by themselves. So at the very beginning, EOS and the development manager try to find a property, some suitable land that will satisfy development criteria. We do a feasibility to make sure there's at least 15% capital gain for our investors, and that all the other requirements are met. You know, the zoning's correct, we can get the number of apartments we want. We then go and produce a set of drawings, check from the local agents to see what the rent returns are likely to be, and then get some valuations on the property to see what the finished product would be like if it were completed today. So in the case of this current one in Odin Road, what will happen is we will gather up 8 investors. They will each contribute at the very beginning $151,000 into the joint venture account. And that joint venture account will be used to buy the land outright. So the joint venture will own the land, there'll be no debt on the land, and the joint venture is composed of the 8 investors. So the land is owned by that group. Once the land's been purchased, we're then able to go and talk to a bank and say, listen, we've got a block of land that's not encumbered. We want to borrow money against that block of land to complete construction. So we're not, the money for the construction doesn't come from the individuals. The joint venture borrows the money on behalf of the joint venture and the joint venture individuals. So there's got a project account where all the funds are housed. The development manager runs all this process. He goes and borrows, in this case, just over $2 million for the construction component, and each of the units is worth $253,000. The borrowings are $253,000 against each of the apartments, giving the total of $2.024 million. So on completion of the project, there is one block of land with 8 apartments on it, and the whole lot is owned by the joint venture. They aren't owned by individuals just yet. The whole thing is owned by the group. There's a loan-to-value ratio of approximately 60% on the project. But now the project's done. We bought the land, we borrowed the funds, we've built the buildings, everything's done and dusted. Now each of the investors needs to separate and go his own way. That was the whole purpose, and take with him, of course, the development profit. So this is where we're up to. We've got a project account, and that project account owes a lender $2.024 million or whatever. So each of the investors then goes and borrows $253,000, whatever it was, against the new apartment in order for them to take ownership. So once they repay the project account, the construction costs for their particular apartment, they then take total ownership of that particular unit. So as you can see, what happens is, as each of them pay back their share of the construction finance, so they then take ownership. So if you break it down back into the numbers again, each investor originally paid $151,000 for the land component. At the very end of the project, they paid $253,000, which is their share of the construction finance, which means the total outlay to them over that period has been $404,000. As of today, the value of these units, according to the formal valuations we had, is $465,000. Now look, that I will guarantee that the amount will change over the next couple of years. I mean, hopefully it'll go up, but I guarantee it won't be 465, it'll be something different. Regardless, there should be a capital gain for the investor at the end of the project. And significantly, the stamp duty on a normal project is not necessarily payable on these style of joint venture arrangements, because there's no necessary transfer of ownership. You are the beneficiary of the joint venture, you are taking over your benefit, therefore there's no duty payable. And that's a saving of approximately $12,000 to $13,000 on this particular project, which is not to be sneezed at. So that's the reason we believe that this joint venture concept, this armchair development, works so well. It provides you with the expertise that you perhaps don't have. The structure allows us to borrow funds. We do not have to do pre-sales in order to gather construction finance. And at the end, each of the investors is able to break away from the joint venture agreement such that they take ownership of the property themselves. And that's why we think this offers many solutions to the problems usually associated with doing a development on your own. All right, let's talk about specifically the development itself, and you probably already know. On the site, we can get 7 two-bedroom apartments and 1 one-bedroom apartment. The zoning is such that allows us to do that. The location, I think, makes it particularly interesting. Hopefully many of you may well be from Perth and you know the area quite well. From a rough view from the outside, this is the location, of course, of the development site here. Perth City, straight down the freeway, down here about 12 kilometres away. There's Hillary's Boat Harbour up here, which is a very popular area, of course. Not only is there a freeway running down to Perth, but there's a railway line there as well. So there's rail and freeway. The Reed Highway, which is a ring road, runs around Perth during the Tonkin and then out to the hills and also down into Midland area there. And some significant areas around here that make it a particularly interesting site. Let me just zoom in a little bit on here. All right, so if we can see the site here. Now up here to the left, there's a very significant shopping centre, Carrup Shopping Centre, a large shopping complex. Further across here, we have a megaplex centre. I think there's something like 18 cinemas in this area, in this complex now. It's a huge cinema complex. Over here, we have the Osborne Park Hospital, just across the freeway, as you can see. And down here on the bottom right-hand corner, this is the Osborne Park commercial and wholesale area. For those that don't know, it's full of wholesalers and light industrial stuff. Lots and lots of work opportunities. It's sort of one of the central commercial hubs in Perth City for sure. A range of schools close by. There's Balcatta High School up to the right, and down Odin Road, and down here there's Churchlands High School, and there's a number, 6 or 7, little primary schools within about probably 5 to 7 kilometres of the actual site itself. This freeway you can obviously see here, and not shown but running at the centre of it, of course, is the railway line. And here there's what they call a bus port. So there's a major bus centre here. So typically the idea is people can either drive in or catch a bus into this large car parking area here and jump on the train station just there to travel through Perth. So particular popular location. And interestingly too, typically what happens is the councils rezone to allow for these medium-rise apartment blocks on major roads, which is good, except that you end up having an apartment block on a fairly busy thoroughfare, which is not necessarily a great thing. What's happened here, though, Odin Road is a very busy road. You can see it links Barnes, this road, Cedric Street, that runs up here into this area up here, and also comes down to Scarborough Beach Road. And so it's quite a busy road. But it turns left on Barnes and now becomes a cul-de-sac. This ends up in here. And so from this point onwards and up to our site, it's very, very quiet. It's just like a normal suburban back street, which is just great for us. Really terrific opportunity. Now, the last and the final thing too, which is an added bonus, this Westfield Innaloo is already a fairly large shopping complex, but they're making some major changes to this. It's now going to double its size. They think they're going to spend $450 million. They're going to move from 51,000 square metres of shopping space that it is currently up to 99,000. They'll move from 130 shops to 240 shops. They'll create about 1,200 jobs, and it'll be finished by 2018, which is not that far away. And perhaps more importantly, The City of Stirling, which is the council involved in this location, is very keen to produce a new town centre that'll house administration along with shopping and entertainment, a whole range of amenities. And so this area around this megaplex, Westfield Innaloo, will become sort of a town centre community hub. And so they're very strongly promoting this concept here. And it's probably within walking distance of this new development, certainly, I don't know, a minute away driving. So this is very interesting to have this major infrastructure development happening just down the road. Now the site itself, you can see from this little indicative drawing by the architects, this was the first drawings we put together, but this gives you a feel for the development. It'll be a block of 4 apartments at the front and 4 apartments in the back. So quite small, quite low rise. From the outside, it'll look a little bit like townhouses, if you like. Now, the bottom one is a 2-bedroom. The top 2 are 2-bedroom. This little one on the left here will be the single-bedroom apartment. But for all intents and purposes, it's very similar to the 2-bedders. I've got some other images here. So this is again the image of the front and the back, and this is the image of the rear apartments as they currently stand. Now there may be some minor changes because we've currently got it in place at development approval, and they may want to tweak a window or adjust an overlook or whatever they may want to do. But at this stage, that's the plans. And that's true too for these actual working drawings. They're not very good quality. If you do want to see a better quality images, we've got some PDFs that are clean and accurate, and you can zoom in to give you much more detail. But as you can see, they're 2-bedroom apartments. This little one is the single bedder, courtyards or balconies, parking in the centre between them. The top stories are mirror images almost of the bottom stories. You can see that the top story at the front sits above the 1-bedder, and that's actually a 2-bedder. We're currently looking at a 65 square metre internally, which is very, very good. But we've done our numbers, our valuations on 60 square metres. We're slightly above the requirements of size for the council. I think for our plot ratio, 63 square metres is about as big as we can go. But we've gone for 65 because it's not very much more, and they have in the past given some concessions to other developers, so hopefully we'll get away with that as well. That will most likely put the valuations up a little bit. All right, it's a bit of a jump. So that's the project itself. Now the development manager is the guy that's going to do all the work on your behalf, and his job really, whilst I've broken it down into component parts, is to do everything. It's his baby. His job is to go from woe to go to complete this project. Even once it's completed and once it's in your hands, he is still there tidying up and finishing off the project. So we'll use Bird Property Group, and we'll use the director, Matt Bird, and you can see the list of chores, as it were, or responsibilities that are his to take up. So he is the boy driving the overall development. Now he is employed by you. You as the joint venture partner and joint venture member. The joint venture employs Matt Bird. And as such, there's a contract between you and him, and there's a whole range of details within that contract. Don't forget, he is an employee of yours, and if you're not happy with his work, you can certainly sack him and find another property development manager. Who's going to do the build? That's an important one too. Matt Bird will be responsible for contracting the builder. When choosing builders, we have in the past tendered, and we'll probably tender again, but it's a limited tender. We're working now with 4 different builders in Perth, and we will provide the details plans to all of those. But we want to make sure they've got experience in building these sorts of developments. Some builders specialise in residential, of course. They're not good for us. Some guys specialise in high-rise, which is different again to what we're trying to do. Ours is much more like a residential, but still not quite. We need a builder of a reasonable size with deep pockets, so there's plenty of stability. We need the builder to find a price that suits our feasibility. And of course, at the end, we need a builder that will build within timelines. Now, we will have a fixed price contract with the builder, and we'll have a fixed time contract with the builder. So if he goes over time, then he will need to pay the joint venture liquidated damages for the amount of time he spends still constructing after the agreed timelines. We showed the plans to some local agents in the area to get a feel for the rent returns. And as you can see, there's a copy of one of them there. So we're thinking around about $390 per week for the 2-bedder and $330 for the 1-bedder. I went on the websites myself and tried to do some comparison because I thought those rents were fairly conservative, a little low. But there is no apartments for rent in Innaloo, which is very interesting in itself, because that would indicate to me that all the available apartments have been grabbed by tenants, given that I can't find any examples of apartments for rent. But anyway, let's use these figures because they look fairly low, and let's be a little bit conservative about this. Now, the same is true for the actual appraisals themselves for the value of the property. So what we did was we sent the plans to some valuers and said, if these apartments were finished to this standard, as per these floor plans, and they're finished today, what would they be worth today? So the 2-bedroom apartment, they came back and said $465, and for the 1-bedroom apartment, they said $360. Now, I must admit, I was a little surprised by these numbers. I've been on the web previously, and I thought around about 500,000 would be about right. We'd spoken to some developers previously, and they had some pre-sales on units very similar to ours in Innaloo, and they had pre-sales at $499, and they were 60 square metre apartments. So $465 seems fairly low, and we got some appraisals back from one of the local agents. And and you can see the 1-bedder, they're talking $370, $380, and for the 2-bedder, they're talking $499 to $550. But regardless of that, we'll stick with those figures for our feasibility. And look, if they're worth more at the end, well, that's just terrific. You guys all have a win. So just the overall figures as a quick recap for you. This is on the 2-bedroom apartments. The initial deposit is $151. The construction and finance is $253, giving a total outlay of $404. Now, guys, these are estimates, of course. We may find we can get the construction cheaper than this. We may find it becomes more expensive. We may be able to get the architectural drawings under what we thought. They may be slightly over, but these are estimates. So the total outlay, $404, and the final market value, as you've seen, we're estimating $465, giving a potential capital gain of around $60,000, everything being equal. The rent returns today are $390 per week, which would give you a yield of over 5%, which is not bad, by the way, in the Perth market currently. That's a return on your initial equity of 40% and an overall development profit of 15.08 from memory. For the 1-bedder, and I must admit I quite like this little 1-bedder, 117 up front, 196 is the construction finance, giving a total cost at the end of 313. Final market value at $360 according to the valuations. That'll give you a profit of around $47,000. Rent returns $330. The yield slightly higher at that rate with 5.48, and again a return on equity of about 40% and a development profit of 15%. So that's where we currently stand. So you perhaps see that some of the advantages of this armchair investment concept are that we give you the chance to pick up a long-term investment property. I would not be focusing on the capital gain at the end of the construction. What I'll be trying to do is this. Look for a well-located long-term investment property. And if you can get it slightly less than market value, then that's just icing on the cake. And if you can get it less than market value and not have to pay the stamp duty as well, that's just even more icing on the cake. But the important thing is it's got to be a good quality long-term investment property, because that's where the money is. It's not really the $30,000 or $40,000 or $50,000 capital gain at the very beginning. It's the $400,000 capital gain in 10 years' time or whatever that you're really looking for. It does give you a chance to purchase below market value. There is a savings in stamp duty, but also there's above market rent returns, of course, because you're getting the same rent as everybody else, but you've paid less. Therefore, your percentage of rent is actually higher. And what perhaps it does do, it gives you a chance to accelerate your portfolio growth. If you're building a property portfolio, then at the end of this project, there's perhaps $40,000 or $50,000 or $60,000 equity that you can access for your next project. So there's a chance to perhaps speed up that growth of your portfolio, if that's your plans. So, what to do? What's next? Well, look, I guess regardless of what's written on the screen, the important thing is to work out what goes on, make sure you understand the concept, and certainly feel free to ring us or email us and ring out all the information you properly can from us. Make sure all your questions are answered. But the first and foremost process is to request the information memorandum. The paperwork that we produce in this webinar, for example, tend to be marketing tools, of course. The information memorandum is not. The information memorandum is the details outlined by the development manager, and that's where the details can be teased out. So if you'd like the information memorandum, contact us and we're happy to send you one. If you're happy with the information memorandum, for goodness sakes, preference your units. Work out which units you like best and flick me an email with those preferences in place. You might want to also check with your broker, of course, and make sure that your finances are intact. Once you've preferenced your units, then that's fine. We go through the process and away we go. And in theory, you can then relax in your armchair while someone else goes ahead and builds the development on your behalf. So folks, that's how the armchair developer concept works, and that's the current project in Odin Road in Innaloo. Now, there's our contact details there. Don't hesitate to call me or Derek, although Derek will be absent for the next couple of weeks, so it may be me that you need to talk to. I'm happy to talk on the phone at any time, or flick me an email and we'll make a copy of this webinar available for everyone. Thanks folks for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this webinar and I look forward to talking to you shortly. Bye for now.